with nearly 40 years of experience in covering West Asia. Elijah, thank you for your time here this evening on the Radio 786 in Cape Town, South Africa. Certainly, very interesting scenes that's certainly showing this a promise of a response by Iran. The timing and the extent so far that you've witnessed, what are your assessments? Good evening.
Good evening, and thank you for having me. We've seen Iran has learned from the last time they bombed Israel in retaliation to the Israeli attack on Iran. They learned to launch their missiles in a kind of corridors in specific locations. And we have seen how the missiles crossed more than 1,700 to 1,800 kilometers in only a few minutes. We're talking about 6 to 8 minutes to reach Tel Aviv. And we also have seen how the Iranians launched these missiles in a corridor where it makes it completely difficult for any country in the world, regardless the sophistication of their interception missiles, to intercept all these missiles. And also we have learned from the Israelis that they have never seen Tel Aviv so devastated, and it was in an unprecedented attack on Tel Aviv in such a way that they did not expect, because Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, said that he destroyed the Iranian missile capability. And obviously, the Iranians still have plenty, and by shooting several hundreds on day one, because we are still on just the beginning, it means that Iran still has a lot of missile to fire.
In terms of the types of ballistic missiles that we see being used right now in this response, some reports indicating that they were hypersonic ballistic missiles. To what measure is Iran armed up and prepared and has sufficient of these missiles with which to be able to penetrate Israeli air defenses? Because that seems to be, firing quite a number in these tranches within these different patterns seems successful, but there are still quite a large quantity of missiles that are being intercepted and some that are falling. So in terms then of the type of missiles that you are seeing being used right now, what are you seeing, and whether Iran has the capability to have a day two of what we're seeing right now?
Well, the modus operandi of Iran is very simple. If they have launched several hundred today, it means they can sustain launching the same quantity for at least another year, because as Iran was expected this war, but not the timing, because indeed it was surprised, and Benjamin Netanyahu and President Trump managed to create an ambush to Iran when they spread information about how beautiful and how positive is going to be the nuclear negotiation in Muscat in Oman on the next Sunday in a few days. And he prepared the psychological ground that there is no attack from Israel, and he did not say it is imminent. On the contrary, they managed to take off guard the Iranians. However, Iran cannot launch several hundred missiles today and then sit on the side and say, okay, I finished all my missiles and I can no longer retaliate. Israel said this war is going to last for at least 2 weeks. And these 2 weeks are really not a specific number, because the Israelis take opportunities. If they are hit by Iranian missiles like today, like the Iranian hit Tel Aviv in this kind, hitting the Ministry of Defense twice, hitting the operational room of the Israelis in Tel Aviv, hitting several military target, and they can sustain that for several days, then Benjamin Netanyahu will stop. But if he sees any weakness from the Iranian side, he will destroy the navy, he will destroy other air forces, the police, he will destroy the oil, and the different excuses saying, well, this is how Iran gets its money, so I need to destroy the energy and the financial resources. And then he will destroy the total Iranian infrastructure as he did with Syria. And Syria did not attack Israel. On the contrary, said Syria was not interested in attacking Israel. It is Israel that continued bombing and destroying all the Syrian capabilities and navy and harbor and airport, etc., just because Israel wanted Syria completely disarmed. It would have done exactly the same with Iran if Iran did not have enough missiles to continue retaliating. And I think Iran is very much aware of it. And this is why we have seen today something not many people paid attention to, is that Iran fired a barrage of missiles from each Iranian province, which means the concentration of the Israeli attack on Tabriz, that on the west of the country, to try and say, I have destroyed the Iranian missile capability and industry, where the response comes from different provinces saying, we still have plenty of missiles and not in one location. Keep in mind that Iran is 1.4 million square kilometers. It's impossible to destroy such a big country. It's a kind of a continent with only a first wave of several hundred missiles by Israel that started at 3 o'clock last night.
Well, there's now reports coming in that a second, or rather that another wave of responses and missiles are now heading towards the occupied lands. We are waiting to see any further details on that, but some indications are that there could have been another tranche of missiles sent as we speak right now. In Tel Aviv, the police chief is saying that the area was hit by several kinds of missiles, that there are buildings that have collapsed and other buildings where entire floors have been destroyed. And let's take a look now at some of the sites that have been targeted in the occupied lands. Of course, there are some residential buildings in Tel Aviv that now have seen missiles fall onto them, some in open streets as well. But I suppose more importantly, there was the attack on the Israeli Defense Ministry. We saw there that there were actual hits on that particular facility and reports of a fire at that facility. Unconfirmed reports about some missiles having potentially fallen in the proximity of the Dimona nuclear facility. That is not yet quite confirmed. But the fact that there are these military sites that have been targeted, what is the significance then of the successful hits here of the Iranian response?
Well, the Israelis hit several residential buildings in Tehran, and they killed the scientists that are civilians, they're not military, with their family, wife and children. There are more than 50 civilian casualties in Iran in buildings in Tehran, residential building. Therefore, the Israelis knew what they were doing. And if Iran hit Tel Aviv and hit several residential buildings, then the Iranians don't really have the GBU series of bombs that come from America, and they are extremely precise with the GPS within 1 to 3 meters precision. Well, either Israel should not start a war with Iran that doesn't have such a precise missiles and accept the consequences, or Iran, or Israel, or America deliver American missiles to Iran so Iran can be more precise, or they stop the war and they don't start it from the first beginning. So if Israel knows that Iran doesn't have such a precision missiles to hit specific target, although we've seen they've hit the Ministry of Defense, so why initiated this war? So that is accepting of the consequences of Benjamin Netanyahu's act on Iran and aggression, violating a sovereign country that is member of the United Nations, and starting a war. And then we hear the European, like France and Germany, ridiculously saying Israel has a right to defend itself when Israel was bombing Iran and Iran was just receiving the Israeli bombs.
And in fact, the French, Macron, is quoted as having said that if required, they will come and defend Israel. That is an interesting development. Russia, of course, has called the Israelis' attack on Iran as irresponsible. At the moment, as it stands right now, we have confirmed reports of the Americans assisting in the shooting down of some of the Iranian missiles. Of course, this is not just a battle between Iran and the occupier that is Israel. We sit here with very powerful armies like the United States coming to the defense here of Israel and other imperialist powers seeking to line up and do the very same, notwithstanding some of the Arab governments that we now know were, for instance, seeking to intervene if there had to have been a response from Yemen, the Jordanians activating their air defenses as well to protect Israel in this regard. So Iran seems to be up against quite a number of players here that is seeking to, in the process, try and circumvent their response to Israel. What is the prospect here of the Americans showing their hand at a much greater level? Because as it stands right now, the Americans were hoping that Iran will go to Oman, have those talks, and potentially find a diplomatic solution, which is, of course, what they claim to be their position. But in actual effect, they are now, of course, seeking to protect and defend Israel. So, what is the anticipation here about this becoming a lot more broader than what it appears to be?
Well, first of all, Israel is never fighting on its own. On the contrary, when the war started in Gaza, the Americans rushed to help the Israelis. They've sent 2,000 of the Delta forces. They've sent generals to support the Israeli, and they created an air and maritime bridge between Israel and the United States, between Germany and Israel, between France and Israel, between Italy and Israel, only to support the Israelis against 363 square kilometers, which is smaller than any city anywhere in Europe. Therefore, with the Israeli Almighty, they need the support of a superpower to carry out any war. Israel is never on its own, is always with the support of the strongest country in the world, that is the United States, with all its allies. So we're talking about the whole Western club and NATO that defends Israel. Furthermore, when the Yemeni or the Iranian retaliated to the Israeli aggression, again, NATO positioned itself in the Red Sea, intercepting all the missiles that fired at Israel, and in the air, they've sent their jet to intercept these missiles to defend Israel. Everybody is always defending Israel when Israel is the aggressor and then rush to the Americans to cry on their shoulders and ask for help. So this is the rule of the game. The Israelis can do everything because they are unaccountable. And today, after the Iranian retaliation, the Israelis rushed to call President Donald Trump, who called immediately the Qatari emir, asking him to de-escalate because the Israelis start the war, they can't finish it. Now, if the Israelis want to hit Iran again, it means that this war is going to be much larger than we can see in the first 24 hours, because it means the Americans will interfere. And if they interfere overtly in bombing Iran, then the US bases around the Middle East will suffer dearly. And this is where perhaps it's not a bad thing to go to the United Nations and say, okay, there is a UN resolution, we stop everything, and the Israelis should respect the ceasefire that did not respect with Lebanon, for example, 3,500 violation in only a few months, and then we'll end the war on Iran. Otherwise, this will continue and is going to be much more damaging. We have not seen yet how Iran is going to react if it is hit hard, and how it is going to hit back, close the harbor of Haifa, close the airport in Ben Gurion, and then most probably the oil, 20% of the oil and energy that crosses the Strait of Hormuz might be affected. All the
Yeah.
maritime crossing from Asia to the rest of the world can also be affected. If this is what the Americans want,
Well, that's the open question because some of the Iranian media is reporting at this time that in Iran, the sentiment is that everything is available to us and closing the Strait of Hormuz is on the table, is what some of the Iranian media is reporting right now. Elijah Magnier, thank you for your time. A Brussels based veteran war correspondent and a senior political risk analyst with nearly 40 years of experience in covering West Asia.